Ethan Caldwell was not your ordinary man. At just 38 years old, he had built an empire from scratch. Starting with nothing but a dream and sheer determination, Ethan turned his small tech startup into a billion-dollar company that revolutionized the way people interacted with technology. He was known for being fiercely intelligent, always 10 steps ahead of everyone else. But despite his success, Ethan wasn't happy. His life revolved around work, and over time, the relentless grind began to take its toll on him. One evening, after closing one of the biggest deals of his career, Ethan left his office feeling both exhausted and restless. The city lights blurred past his car window as he drove home, his mind racing with thoughts about deadlines, meetings, and strategies. It was late, and the roads were slick from an earlier rainstorm. As he approached a sharp curve, another vehicle suddenly swerved into his lane. Before Ethan could react, there was a deafening crash. Metal screeched against metal, glass shattered, and everything went black. When Ethan opened his eyes again, he found himself lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by machines beeping rhythmically. Tubes snaked out of his arms, and the sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air. His body felt heavy, and every breath seemed like an effort. A doctor stood nearby, speaking softly to someone outside Ethan's field of vision. "He's stable for now," the doctor said, "but we're not sure when or if he'll wake up." Unbeknownst to the medical team, Ethan had woken up. In fact, he regained consciousness just 3 days after the accident. But instead of alerting anyone, Ethan made a split-second decision. He would pretend to remain in a coma. At first, it was curiosity that drove him. How would people behave around him if they thought he couldn't hear or see? Would they speak freely? Would they reveal things they normally wouldn't? Ethan had always been fascinated by human behavior, and this unexpected situation presented him with a rare opportunity to observe it firsthand. The staff at the hospital quickly grew accustomed to their silent patient. They checked his vitals, adjusted his medications, and occasionally spoke to him as though he might somehow understand. Most of them treated him with professional detachment, but one person stood out: Clara Bennett, a nurse who had been assigned to care for him. Clara was different from the others. She moved with quiet grace, her hands steady as she worked. Her voice carried a warmth that made even the simplest tasks feel comforting. And unlike some of her colleagues, Clara didn't treat Ethan like just another case. She treated him like a person. From the moment she entered his room, Ethan sensed that Clara had a story of her own. There was a sadness behind her kind smile, a weight she carried with her wherever she went. Sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, Clara would pause by the window and stare out at the city skyline. Her shoulders slumped as if burdened by something too heavy to bear. Ethan couldn't help but wonder what secrets lay beneath her calm exterior. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan continued his charade. He listened intently to conversations happening around him, piecing together fragments of information about the hospital and its staff. Doctors discussed his condition in clinical terms. Nurses gossiped about their personal lives, and visitors came and went, leaving flowers and cards beside his bed. Through it all, Clara remained a constant presence. She stayed longer than necessary, often sitting quietly by his bedside while updating his chart or simply holding his hand for a few moments. One night, as the hospital grew quiet and the dim glow of the hallway lights filtered into the room, Clara leaned closer to Ethan. "You? No," she whispered almost to herself. "I hope you can hear me. If you can, I want you to know that I'm doing my best. For you. For everyone." Her words caught Ethan off guard. Was she talking to him directly? Or was this just another moment of vulnerability slipping through the cracks of her guarded demeanor? As the days passed, Ethan noticed subtle changes in Clara's behavior. She seemed more anxious, glancing over her shoulder whenever she entered his room. Once, he heard her arguing with another nurse in hushed tones. "I didn't have a choice," Clara hissed before storming away. What choice was she referring to? Ethan's curiosity deepened. Whatever was troubling Clara, it clearly extended beyond her duties as a nurse. And the more he observed, the more he realized that her struggles might intersect with his own reasons for staying silent. Ethan knew he couldn't keep pretending forever. Eventually, he'd have to wake up and face the world again. But until then, he decided to use this unique position to learn as much as he could, not only about Clara, but also about the hidden dynamics of the hospital itself. Little did he know his patience would soon pay off in ways he never imagined. Ethan's days in the hospital were long and quiet, but they were far from uneventful. Each moment brought new observations, new insights into the lives of those around him. Clara, in particular, became a focal point of his attention. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, kind yet guarded, strong yet visibly burdened. There was something about her that intrigued Ethan, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. It wasn't just her compassion or her dedication to her patients. It was the way she carried herself, as though she were hiding a secret too heavy to share. One evening, when the hospital corridors were unusually quiet, Clara entered Ethan's room carrying a clipboard. The late shift always seemed to weigh heavily on her, and tonight was no exception. Her steps were slower than usual, her shoulders slightly slumped. She adjusted the IV drip connected to Ethan's arm, her movements precise but mechanical. For a while, she worked in silence, jotting down notes and checking his vitals. Then, as if unable to hold it in any longer, she began to speak. At first, her words were soft, almost inaudible. "I don't know why I'm telling you this," she murmured, glancing at Ethan's seemingly unconscious form. "Maybe because you can't respond. Or maybe because, well, does it even matter?" She sighed deeply, pulling up a chair beside his bed. "You're probably thinking, what does this nurse have to complain about? And honestly, you wouldn't be wrong. Compared to most people, my life is fine, but sometimes fine isn't enough." Ethan listened intently, his heart pounding with anticipation. He had suspected there was more to Clara than met the eye, but he hadn't expected her to open up like this. Her voice trembled as she continued. "A few months ago, I made a mistake, a big one. I thought I was doing the right thing, but now I'm not so sure." She paused, running a hand through her hair. "The hospital. It's not what it seems. Not all of it, anyway. Some things happen here that shouldn't. Things that go against everything I swore to uphold when I became a nurse." Ethan's mind raced. What was she talking about? Was she referring to some minor oversight, or was it something more serious? Before he could process further, Clara leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They told me it was harmless. Just small changes to patient records, nothing that would hurt anyone. At least that's what they said. But now..." Her voice cracked, and she wiped away a tear before it could fall. "Now I'm starting to see the bigger picture, and it scares me." Ethan's chest tightened. Whatever Clara was involved in, it clearly weighed heavily on her conscience. He wanted to comfort her, to reassure her that she wasn't alone, but he remained still, maintaining the illusion of unconsciousness. Instead, he focused on every word she said, piecing together the fragments of her confession. Clara took a deep breath, steadying herself before continuing. "It started with one file, then another. They pressured me, said it was for the good of the hospital, that we needed to protect our reputation, our funding. But now I realize they weren't protecting anything. They were covering up their own mistakes, making sure no one found out the truth." She shook her head, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the chair. "And I let them. I went along with it because I didn't know what else to do, because saying no felt impossible." Her confession sent a chill down Ethan's spine. Corruption within hospitals wasn't unheard of, but hearing it firsthand from someone like Clara, a person who clearly cared deeply about her patients, was unsettling. Ethan couldn't help but wonder how widespread the issue was. How many other nurses or doctors were caught in the same web? And who exactly was pulling the strings behind the scenes? As if sensing his unspoken questions, Clara added, "It's not just me. There are others too, people higher up who make the decisions, people who think they're untouchable. Dr. Hale, he's the worst of them. He's charming, sure, but underneath, he's ruthless. If you cross him, you'll regret it." The name struck a chord with Ethan. Dr. Marcus Hale was the hospital's chief administrator, a man known for his charisma and leadership skills. On the surface, he appeared to be the perfect face of the institution, polished, professional, and endlessly competent. But according to Clara, there was another side to him, one hidden beneath layers of charm and authority. Clara glanced at Ethan again, her expression softening. "I don't know why I'm telling you all this. Maybe I just needed to say it out loud to hear the words myself. Or maybe I hope you'll wake up someday and remember what I've said. That you'll understand why I did what I did. And why I need to make it right." Her final words lingered in the air long after she left the room. Ethan lay there, his mind racing with possibilities. If what Clara said was true, and he had no reason to doubt her, then the hospital was sitting on a ticking time bomb. The implications were staggering: falsified records, compromised care, and potentially dangerous consequences for patients. Someone needed to expose the truth. But how? And who would believe a whistleblower like Clara? For the first time since the accident, Ethan felt a flicker of purpose. His initial decision to pretend to be in a coma had been driven by curiosity, but now it had evolved into something more meaningful. He realized that his position gave him a unique advantage, an opportunity to gather evidence without drawing suspicion. With Clara's help, perhaps they could uncover the full extent of the corruption and bring those responsible to justice. But it wouldn't be easy. The risks were enormous, not only for Clara but also for himself. If their plan failed, the fallout could destroy both their lives. Yet despite the danger, Ethan knew he couldn't turn away. For years he had lived solely for success, chasing wealth and power without considering the impact of his actions on others. Now, lying in that hospital bed, he saw a chance to use his resources for something greater, to fight for integrity, accountability, and the countless patients who deserved better. As the night wore on, Ethan replayed Clara's words in his mind, committing every detail to memory. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: he wouldn't stay silent forever. When the time came, he would awaken, not just from his feigned coma, but from the complacency that had defined his life until now. And when he did, the world would take notice. The days that followed Clara's confession were some of the most intense and calculated in Ethan's life. He had always been a man who thrived on strategy, but this was different. This wasn't about closing deals or outmaneuvering competitors. It was about uncovering the truth and doing what was right, even if it meant risking everything. Every interaction, every word, every movement became part of an intricate plan. And at the center of it all was Clara. Clara returned to Ethan's room the next evening, her face pale and drawn. She seemed hesitant, as though unsure whether she should trust him or herself. But something in her demeanor shifted when she saw him lying there, still and silent. Maybe it was the illusion of safety his comatose state provided, or maybe it was the quiet strength she sensed beneath his calm exterior. Whatever it was, she began speaking again, her voice softer than before. "I didn't sleep last night," she admitted, pulling up the same chair she'd sat in the day before. "Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, the patients, whose records I altered. Some of them are doing fine, but others..." Her voice trailed off, and she looked down at her hands. "What if something happens to them because of me? What if someone gets hurt, or worse?" Ethan wanted to reach out to tell her that she wasn't alone, that they could fix this together. But he remained perfectly still, letting her continue. He knew how important it was for her to talk, to unburden herself of the guilt that had been eating away at her. "Dr. Hale doesn't care about any of that," Clara said bitterly. "All he cares about is protecting himself in the hospital. If anyone finds out what we've done, what I've done, he'll throw me under the bus without a second thought." She paused, biting her lip. "But I can't keep living like this. I need to make things right." Ethan's mind raced. Making things right wouldn't be easy, especially not with someone as powerful as Dr. Hale involved. But Clara's determination gave him hope. Together, they could find a way to expose the corruption without putting themselves in unnecessary danger. The key was gathering evidence, solid, undeniable proof that would leave no room for doubt. Over the next few days, Ethan devised a plan. It started small, with subtle movements designed to test Clara's trust. When she asked if he could hear her, he blinked twice, a signal they both agreed on earlier during one of her whispered monologues. At first, Clara was startled, her eyes widening as she processed what had just happened. Then slowly, a smile spread across her face. "You're awake, aren't you?" she whispered, leaning closer. "You've been awake this whole time." Ethan blinked again, confirming her suspicion. Relief washed over Clara's features, followed quickly by concern. "Why didn't you say anything?" she asked. "Do you have any idea how much trouble you could be in if anyone finds out?" Ethan responded with another blink, signaling that he trusted her judgment. He couldn't speak yet, not until they were absolutely sure they could act without drawing attention. But his silence spoke volumes. Clara understood immediately. "You were waiting," she said softly. "Waiting for the right moment." From that point forward, their partnership grew stronger. Clara began sneaking documents into Ethan's room whenever she could, careful, to avoid detection. Patient files, emails, memos, all of it painted a clearer picture of the corruption within the hospital. Ethan memorized every detail, piecing together the connections between the falsified records and the individuals responsible. At the same time, Ethan worked on building Clara's confidence. Through coded blinks and slight squeezes of her hand, he reassured her that she wasn't alone. He reminded her why they were doing this, not just for themselves, but for the countless patients who deserved better. Slowly but surely, Clara began to believe in their mission, and in herself. Their collaboration wasn't without challenges, though. One afternoon, while Clara was photocopying a particularly incriminating document, she nearly got caught by another nurse. Heart pounding, she managed to slip the papers back into the file before anyone noticed. When she returned to Ethan's room later that evening, her hands were shaking. "That was too close," she whispered, sinking into the chair beside his bed. "If they find out what I'm doing..." "They won't," Ethan signaled with a firm double blink. His unwavering resolve steadied her nerves. As the weeks passed, their bond deepened. What had started as a reluctant alliance transformed into something far more meaningful. Clara confided in Ethan about her fears, her regrets, and her hopes for the future. In turn, Ethan shared glimpses of his own struggles, his loneliness, his dissatisfaction with the life he had built, and his desire to make a difference. One night, as they reviewed the latest batch of documents, Clara turned to Ethan with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said simply, "for believing in me, for giving me a chance to do the right thing." Ethan blinked once, then twice. Silent promise that he would stand by her no matter what. In that moment, they both knew they were ready to take the next step. They had gathered enough evidence to expose the corruption, but revealing it would require careful timing and precision. They needed allies, people outside the hospital who could help amplify their message and protect them from retaliation. With Clara's guidance, Ethan identified a few key individuals who might be willing to listen. A local journalist known for investigative reporting, a retired doctor with ties to the medical board, and a patient advocacy group dedicated to improving healthcare transparency. Each of these contacts represented a potential lifeline, a way to ensure their story reached the public without being silenced. But before they could move forward, Ethan faced a critical decision: when to wake up. Timing was everything. If he revealed himself too soon, they risked losing the element of surprise. If he waited too long, the evidence might become outdated, or worse, disappear altogether. After much deliberation, Ethan and Clara settled on a date. It would coincide with a major fundraising event hosted by the hospital, an occasion where Dr. Hale and other top officials would be in attendance. By choosing that moment to re-enter the world, Ethan could guarantee maximum exposure and maximum impact. In the days leading up to the event, Ethan prepared himself mentally and physically. He practiced simple movements, flexing his fingers and toes to regain strength. Clara coached him on how to react convincingly when the doctors finally examined him, ensuring that his recovery appeared genuine. Despite the tension hanging over them, there were moments of levity too. Once Clara joked about teaching him Morse code so they could communicate more efficiently. Ethan responded with a playful blink, earning a laugh from both of them. By the time the morning of the big day arrived, Ethan felt ready to awaken from his self-imposed slumber, ready to confront the people who had abused their power. And most importantly, ready to stand alongside Clara as they fought for justice, not just for themselves, but for everyone who deserved better. As Clara adjusted his blankets one last time, she smiled at him. "This is it," she said softly. "Are you sure you're ready?" Ethan blinked twice, his expression resolute. Yes, he was ready, more than ready, because this wasn't just about waking up anymore. It was about stepping into a new chapter, one defined by courage, integrity, and the unwavering belief that even in the darkest times, change was possible. The morning of the hospital's annual fundraising gala arrived, and the air buzzed with anticipation. Doctors, nurses, and administrative staff bustled about, ensuring everything was perfect for the high-profile event. For Ethan and Clara, however, the day carried a weight far beyond the usual pressures of hosting donors and dignitaries. This was the moment they had been preparing for, the culmination of weeks of planning, trust-building, and gathering evidence. Yet as the hours ticked closer to their plan's execution, cracks began to form in their carefully constructed strategy. Clara had spent the early hours of the day finalizing preparations for Ethan's miraculous recovery. She double-checked his vitals, adjusted his medication levels, and rehearsed her role as the astonished nurse who would discover him awake. Everything seemed to be falling into place until she noticed something unsettling. Another nurse, Sarah, had been lingering around Ethan's room more than usual. Sarah wasn't part of their inner circle. In fact, she had always struck Clara as overly curious and eager to please Dr. Hale. Her presence made Clara uneasy. "Why are you spending so much time in here?" Sarah asked casually one afternoon, glancing at Ethan's chart. "He's just another coma patient, isn't he? Or is there something special about him?" Clara forced a smile, trying to keep her tone light. "Not really. His family is pretty wealthy, though, so I guess everyone wants to make sure we're doing everything, right?" Sarah raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Still, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah suspected something. It wasn't paranoia. She knew how closely monitored the hospital staff was, especially when it came to patients like Ethan. His extended stay and lack of progress had already raised eyebrows among the higher-ups. If anyone discovered what she and Ethan were up to, the consequences could be catastrophic. Later that evening, as Clara prepared to leave for the gala, Dr. Marcus Hale himself summoned her to his office. The mere mention of his name sent a shiver down her spine. Dr. Hale was known for his charm, but beneath his polished exterior lay a calculating and ruthless leader. Clara hesitated outside his door, steeling herself before knocking softly. "Come in," came his smooth voice from inside. Dr. Hale sat behind his desk, his sharp eyes scanning her as she entered. "Nurse Bennett," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "I wanted to discuss your recent behavior, specifically your attachment to Mr. Caldwell." Clara froze. Had someone reported her? Was this about the extra time she'd spent in Ethan's room? She swallowed hard, forcing herself to remain calm. "Attachment, sir?" she asked, feigning confusion. "I'm just following protocol. He's a critical patient after all." Dr. Hale leaned back in his chair, studying her intently. "Protocol doesn't require staying late or having private conversations with unconscious patients, does it?" His tone was casual, almost conversational, but there was an edge to it that sent alarm bells ringing in Clara's mind. I don't know what you mean," Clara stammered, her palms growing sweaty. "I've only done what's necessary for his care." Dr. Hale smiled, a cold, calculating expression that made her blood run cold. "Let me be clear, Nurse Bennett. You're a valuable asset to this hospital, but loyalty matters here, and if I find out you're hiding something or worse, working against us, you'll regret it." Do I make myself clear? Yes, Dr. Hale, Clara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She nodded quickly, standing to leave before he could say anything else. As she walked back to Ethan's room, her heart pounded in her chest. Every step felt heavier than the last. She had underestimated how closely Dr. Hale was watching them, and now their entire plan was in jeopardy. When Clara returned to Ethan's bedside, she found him lying exactly as she'd left him, still and silent. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to imagine abandoning the mission altogether. They could walk away, pretend none of this ever happened, and go back to their lives. But deep down, Clara knew that wasn't an option. Not anymore. Too many people depended on them to expose the truth. Giving up now would mean letting Dr. Hale win, letting the corruption continue unchecked. Ethan sensed her distress immediately. Though he couldn't speak, his steady gaze conveyed understanding and determination. Clara took a deep breath, gripping the edge of his bed for support. We can't stop now, she whispered more to herself than to him. If we do, everything we've worked for will be for nothing. Together they decided to push forward. Despite the risks, Clara resolved to act even more cautiously, avoiding any behavior that might raise suspicion. She instructed Ethan to limit his movements until the exact moment they revealed his awakening, ensuring that no one caught wind of their plan prematurely. Meanwhile, Ethan focused on memorizing every detail of the evidence they had gathered, knowing that once the truth came out, they would need to move quickly. As the clock neared the start of the gala, Clara slipped away to join the other staff members attending the event. The ballroom was decorated lavishly, with sparkling chandeliers casting warm light over tables adorned with white linens and floral arrangements. Guests mingled, sipping champagne and exchanging pleasantries, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. Midway through the evening, Clara excused herself, claiming she needed to check on a patient. Instead, she hurried to Ethan's room, her heart racing. It was time. With trembling hands, she adjusted his IV drip and leaned close to his ear. Ethan, she whispered urgently, this is it. Wake up. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Ethan opened his eyes. At first, his gaze was unfocused, as though he were emerging from a fog. But as clarity returned, he turned his head slightly, meeting Clara's anxious expression, with a look of quiet resolve. Clara gasped, pretending to be shocked. Oh my God, she exclaimed, loud enough for nearby staff to hear. He's awake. Someone call the doctors. Within minutes, the room filled with activity. Doctors rushed in, checking Ethan's vitals and peppering Clara with questions. Word spread quickly through the hospital, reaching the gala attendees downstairs. The news of Ethan Caldwell's miraculous recovery electrified the crowd, drawing gasps of amazement and applause. Reporters stationed at the event scrambled to capture the story, sensing its potential significance. Dr. Hale appeared moments later, his face a mask of professional concern. But Clara noticed the flicker of unease in his eyes. Mr. Caldwell, he said smoothly, stepping forward. Welcome back. How are you feeling? Ethan blinked slowly, playing the part of a groggy yet alert patient. He managed a faint smile, mouthing a single word. Tired. We'll take good care of you, Dr. Hale assured him, patting his shoulder. But as he turned to leave, Clara caught the subtle narrowing of his eyes, a warning that their victory was far from secure. Later that night, as the hospital settled into a tense calm, Ethan and Clara exchanged a glance. They had succeeded in taking the first step toward exposing the truth. But the battle was far from over. Dr. Hale and his allies wouldn't go down without a fight, and the coming days would test their courage and resolve like never before. Yet despite the challenges ahead, they faced them together, united by a shared purpose and an unshakable belief in the power of justice. The days following Ethan's miraculous awakening were a whirlwind of activity. The hospital buzzed with excitement, and the media couldn't get enough of the story. Headlines proclaimed Ethan Caldwell's recovery as nothing short of miraculous, a triumph of modern medicine and human resilience. Reporters camped outside the hospital, eager to catch a glimpse of the millionaire who had defied the odds. For Ethan and Clara, this sudden spotlight was both an opportunity and a challenge. They knew they had to tread carefully. One wrong move could expose their plan before they were ready. Ethan played his part perfectly. He appeared groggy and disoriented, speaking only in short sentences when prompted by doctors or visitors. His demeanor suggested gratitude but also vulnerability, which helped maintain the illusion that he was still recovering from weeks of unconsciousness. Meanwhile, Clara stayed by his side, acting as the compassionate nurse who had been instrumental in his care. To the outside world, their relationship seemed professional, but beneath the surface it was a partnership forged in secrecy and trust. Behind closed doors, however, the tension was palpable. Dr. Marcus Hale watched Ethan like a hawk, his polished smile never wavering but his eyes sharp and calculating. He visited Ethan's room frequently, often accompanied by other senior staff members. Each time, he asked probing questions about Ethan's memory, his awareness during the coma, and whether he remembered anything unusual happening during his stay. Ethan responded vaguely, claiming fragments of memory were returning but nothing concrete. It was a delicate balancing act, providing just enough detail to satisfy curiosity without revealing too much. Clara noticed the subtle changes in Dr. Hale's behavior. He became more attentive, more involved in Ethan's treatment plan than necessary. She overheard him instructing the medical team to document every interaction with Ethan meticulously. "We need to ensure there are no loose ends," he said once, his voice low but firm. The implication was clear. Dr. Hale suspected something wasn't quite right, and he was determined to cover all bases. Despite the mounting pressure, Ethan and Clara pressed on with their plan. Using Ethan's status as a high-profile patient, they began gathering allies outside the hospital. One evening, under the pretense of updating Ethan's chart, Clara slipped a flash drive containing copies of the falsified records into her pocket. She then arranged a covert meeting with Rachel Myers, a local investigative journalist known for exposing corruption in powerful institutions. Rachel agreed to meet Clara at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. When Clara arrived, Rachel greeted her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "You said you have information that could blow the lid off this hospital scandal," Rachel began, leaning forward. "But I need proof. Solid evidence." Clara hesitated for a moment before sliding the flash drive across the table. "Everything you need is on here," she said softly. "Patient files, emails, memos, it's all there. Just promise me one thing. Don't publish anything until we're ready. We need to make sure Ethan is safe first." Rachel examined the contents of the drive, her expression shifting from doubt to astonishment. "This is huge," she murmured. "If even half of this is true, it'll be front-page news worldwide." She looked up at Clara, her tone serious. "You understand what you're risking by coming forward, right? Once this goes public, there's no turning back." "I know," Clara replied, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "But I can't keep living like this. Neither can Ethan. Too many people have suffered because of their silence." Back at the hospital, Ethan continued to play his role while secretly recording conversations with key staff members. He used a small voice recorder hidden in his bedside drawer, capturing admissions and incriminating statements whenever someone spoke freely around him. Dr. Hale, in particular, proved to be an unwitting goldmine of information. During one visit, he casually mentioned how certain difficult cases had been handled discreetly to protect the hospital's reputation. Another time, he boasted about the fundraising gala's success, crediting his leadership for securing vital donations. Each snippet of conversation added another brick to the wall of evidence against him. As the pieces fell into place, Ethan and Clara prepared for the final phase of their plan, a press conference. With Rachel's help, they scheduled the event to coincide with the release of her exposé. The timing was critical. They needed to strike while the iron was hot, ensuring maximum impact. Ethan would address the public directly, sharing his experience and revealing the truth about the hospital's unethical practices. Clara, meanwhile, would testify alongside him, providing first-hand accounts of the coercion and manipulation she endured. The night before the press conference, Ethan and Clara met in his room to go over the details one last time. The air was thick with anticipation, their nerves stretched taut. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Clara asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Once we step out there, there's no going back." Ethan nodded firmly. "I've spent my whole life chasing success without considering what really matters," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "This is our chance to make a difference, to stand up for the people who can't fight for themselves. I'm not backing down now." Clara smiled faintly, touched by his resolve. "Neither am I," she said. "We'll face whatever comes, next together." The morning of the press conference dawned bright and clear. A crowd gathered outside the hospital, reporters jostling for position as cameras flashed and microphones were set up. Inside, Ethan and Clara stood side by side, their hearts pounding but their spirits unyielding. As they walked toward the podium, the weight of the moment settled over them. This was it, the culmination of weeks of courage, sacrifice, and unwavering determination. Ethan stepped up to the microphone, his presence commanding attention. "Good morning," he began, his voice strong and steady. "My name is Ethan Caldwell, and for the past several weeks I've witnessed firsthand the dark side of an institution meant to heal and protect. What I'm about to share isn't easy, but it's necessary. For the patients who deserve better, for the nurses and doctors trying to do the right thing, and for anyone who believes in justice." As Ethan spoke, Clara stood beside him, her head held high. Together they unveiled the evidence they had gathered, exposing the corruption that had festered within the hospital's walls. Gasps rippled through the audience as Rachel's exposé hit the internet, spreading like wildfire across social media platforms. By the end of the day, the story dominated headlines nationwide, sparking outrage and calls for accountability. Dr. Hale and his accomplices scrambled to defend themselves, but the evidence was overwhelming. Arrests were made, investigations launched, and reforms promised. For Ethan and Clara, the victory was bittersweet. They had risked everything to bring the truth to light, and though the road ahead would be long, they knew they had made a difference. As the dust began to settle, Ethan turned to Clara with a grateful smile. "Thank you," he said simply, "for believing in me, for standing by my side. We did it." Clara returned his smile, her eyes shining with tears of relief and pride. "No, Ethan," she replied, "we did it together." The aftermath of the press conference was nothing short of seismic. The hospital, once regarded as a pillar of excellence in healthcare, became the epicenter of a nationwide scandal. News outlets dissected every detail of Ethan and Clara's revelations, amplifying their voices to an audience hungry for accountability. People were outraged, not just at the corruption within the institution, but at the realization that such practices could exist unchecked in places meant to heal and protect. For Ethan and Clara, this wave of public support was both validating and overwhelming. Dr. Marcus Hale and several other senior administrators were swiftly removed from their positions, arrested on charges ranging from fraud to endangering patient safety. Investigations revealed that the falsified records had impacted dozens of patients, some of whom had suffered serious complications due to mismanaged care. Families who had long suspected something was amiss finally found answers, and many filed lawsuits against the hospital. Meanwhile, regulatory bodies launched sweeping audits across similar institutions, determined to root out any hidden networks of corruption. For Clara, the fallout was personal. Though hailed as a hero by many, she also faced backlash from former colleagues who felt betrayed by her actions. Some accused her of disloyalty, while others questioned why she hadn't spoken up sooner. The criticism stung, but Clara refused to let it shake her resolve. "I made mistakes," she admitted during one interview, her voice steady despite the weight of scrutiny. But staying silent wasn't an option anymore. Too many lives depended on someone speaking the truth. Ethan stood firmly by her side, throughout the chaos, using his influence and resources to shield her from harm. He hired a top-notch legal team to ensure Clara's protection, knowing full well that those implicated in the scandal would stop at nothing to discredit them. Together they navigated subpoenas, depositions, and endless media appearances, their bond growing stronger with each challenge they overcame. What had started as a partnership born of necessity evolved into something deeper, a shared mission, to create lasting change. As the dust began to settle, Ethan turned his attention to the future. He knew exposing the truth was only the first step. Real reform required action. With Clara's guidance, he established the Caldwell Foundation for Healthcare Transparency, an organization dedicated to supporting whistleblowers, advocating for stricter oversight in medical institutions, and improving patient care standards. The foundation quickly gained traction, attracting donations from individuals and organizations eager to contribute to meaningful change. Clara, meanwhile, decided it was time for a new chapter in her life. After years of working in environments riddled with ethical compromises, she yearned for a fresh start. She left the hospital, trading in her scrubs for a desk at a nonprofit focused on patient advocacy. Her role allowed her to channel her experiences into helping others navigate the complexities of the healthcare system. It was challenging work, but it gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Despite their busy schedules, Ethan and Clara remained close. Their connection went beyond gratitude or mutual respect. It was built on trust forged through adversity. They spent evenings discussing ideas for the foundation, brainstorming ways to amplify its impact. Over time, these conversations grew, lighter, peppered with laughter and moments of quiet understanding. Neither of them had anticipated falling in love, especially under such extraordinary circumstances, but it happened naturally, like two puzzle pieces finally fitting together. One evening, months after the scandal had begun to fade from the headlines, Ethan invited Clara to join him for dinner at a secluded rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. The twinkling lights below mirrored the warmth between them as they sat across from each other, sharing stories about their day. When the meal ended, Ethan stood and extended his hand. "Come with me," he said, leading her to the edge of the rooftop where a telescope awaited. "What's this?" Clara asked, smiling curiously. "Look through it," Ethan urged, adjusting the lens slightly. Peering through the eyepiece, Clara gasped. Through the telescope, she could see a distant billboard featuring their faces alongside the slogan, "Transparency Saves Lives." Beneath it was information about the Caldwell Foundation and how people could get involved. "I wanted you to be the first to see it," Ethan explained, his voice soft. "You've given so much, to me, to the cause, and I wanted to remind you that none of this would have been possible without you." Clara turned to him, tears glistening in her eyes. "We did this together, Ethan. You don't need to thank me." He smiled, reaching into his pocket. "Actually, there's one more thing." He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a simple yet elegant ring. "Clara, you've taught me what it means to live with integrity, to fight for what's right even when it's hard. I can't imagine doing any of this without you. Will you marry me?" For a moment, Clara was speechless. Then, with a radiant smile, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "1,000 times yes." Their engagement marked the beginning of a new journey, one filled with hope, healing, and a shared commitment to making the world a better place. Together, they continued to grow the foundation, expanding its reach and impact. Ethan leveraged his wealth and connections to fund initiatives aimed at training nurses and doctors in ethical decision-making, while Clara worked tirelessly to amplify the voices of marginalized patients. Years later, the legacy of their courage lived on. The hospital where it all began underwent a complete overhaul, implementing policies designed to prevent future misconduct. Whistleblowers inspired by Clara's bravery came forward in other institutions, sparking investigations that led to widespread reforms. And Ethan and Clara, they remained inseparable, their love a testament to the power of resilience and redemption. In now interviews, Ethan often reflected on how his accident had changed him, not just physically but emotionally and spiritually. Sometimes life throws you curveballs, he said during one talk. But if you're willing to listen, even the hardest moments can lead to something beautiful. For me, that something was Clara, and the chance to use my second chance to help others. Clara echoed his sentiments, adding, "We all make mistakes. What matters is whether we choose to learn from them and do better next time." That's what Ethan taught me, and what I hope our story teaches others. Together they proved that no matter how dark things may seem, light can always break through. All it takes is courage, compassion, and the willingness to stand up for what's right, even when the odds are stacked against you.